I want to share just briefly about Christian theater and the role that it can play in culture. So my name is John Warden. I graduated with a Bachelor of Arts in Theater Performance, worked a couple years as a professional actor, and then I went on to seminary and got my master's degree in theology. And a lot of times people will ask me, theater and theology, like how do those two mix? And yes, I will admit they are a little bit unique in a lot of ways, but there's actually a lot of intersection as well. When you're a pastor and you stand on stage and you preach a message, you hope that the hearers of your message will take what you're saying, it will impact their life, and then they will go out into the community and society and make an influence, a positive influence. And you know, theater is a lot of the same thing. We'll stand on this stage and you'll sing and you'll dance and you'll portray a message to those who are in the audience. And the hope is that that message will change them in some way and that they will go out and they will shape culture according to what they've learned. How many of you have heard of the word balladeer before? It's kind of an old word. We don't really use it this much this day and age. But it was a word that was used in the Middle Ages to describe people, specifically artists, who would travel around the countryside. They would sing, they would dance, they would recite poetry, they would play instruments, and they would tell a story about history, or a story about current events, or about people, or heroic actions. And their ideas, their thoughts, their theology would impact and influence the society around them. You see, a balladeer is an artist who speaks prophetically into culture. Friends, we live in a broken world where there are lots of pain and suffering, where we see the disintegration of morals little by little. We need artists, we need Christian artists who will stand and speak and preach the gospel through their art. You see, even Herod finds this man innocent. He is not worthy of death. If you look back through history, many of the religious movements throughout time have had art play a significant role in them. In the Reformation, Martin Luther, when 85% of the Germans were illiterate, he took music and lyrics, he put them to biblical truth, made songs out of them, what we now know as hymns, and those hymns were distributed across the area, and thousands were converted. During the English revival of 1740, there was two men named Charles and John Wesley. Maybe you've heard of them. They wrote somewhere between 7,000 and 9,000 hymns. Much like Luther, their hymns were distributed, and they caught the imagination of the people. They spoke new life and meaning into life. And it was part of the revival of the 1740s. You see, art played a significant influence into culture. Three people who were converted during the 1740 English revival. One was a man named William Carey, went on to be known as, we call him today, the father of modern missions. Another one, a man named William Wilberforce, perhaps you've heard of his name, became a British Parliament member, and he stood up against the evils of slavery. Another one called Josiah Wedgwood, he actually was a potter. And he was one of the finest potters, created some of the best ceramics of his time. And he was listening and hearing and watching slavery, and he said, I want to do something with my art to put forth a message that would prevent the evil of slavery going forward. So he made these little medallions that were distributed all over the country of England. And on that medallion was a picture of a slave in chains, and it said, am I not a man and a brother? Those medallions were like the protest t-shirts of today. They were distributed, and thousands of people heard about slavery, and it changed their sentiment and their mindset about slavery. Wedgwood stood up with his art, stood up for biblical justice. Wedgwood, Luther, Wesley, many men and women, they were balladeers of their time. What we need today are artists who will live into their calling, who will sing, dance, sculpt, create films, do theater for God's glory.
Miss, you are worthy because you have been chosen to be the King's guest. Come with us now. We will lead you.
kids can just walk right in and be a part of your kingdom.
Lights Up Productions seeks to create quality theater with a biblical worldview. To speak the gospel, the goodness of God, the beauty of God, the forgiveness and love of God. Their desire is to create a culture outside of the church that will reflect the kingdom of God. We need more balladeers. As my good friend Darrow Miller, author, says, if you want to know about the legislation of tomorrow, you look at the arts of today. You watch our films, you listen to our music, you watch what is put on stage, and you will know the messages that are going into our culture that shape the legislation of tomorrow. Friends, I believe God can use Christian theater to make an impact far greater and deeper than we could ever imagine. 3 months ago, at the Orphan Theater, just a few miles from here, we did the Passion of the Cross. Several thousand people saw that show. Many of them likely were Christians, some of them likely not. What if one of those people who raised their hands, one of the many people who raised their hands during one of those performances, what if their life surrendered, that they would be a person that would stand up for biblical justice, that would give their life to missions, that would be the next William Wilberforce? The arts shape culture. They have in the past, they are doing it in the present, and they will continue to do so in the future. Let's redeem the arts for God's glory. In a moment, 11-year-old girl named Lydia, who is my daughter, will come out here and sing a song.
I don't know how you treat a lady, even one who has gone astray.
Her, along with 15 women, will sing the song Born to Be Loved. It was a song that was performed in the show Lost in Vegas last September. Lydia played the part of Casey, and Casey was the daughter of a murdered prostitute. And the song Born to Be Loved talks about the value of women. Talks about God's desire for respect and honor and value for women. A message that our culture desperately needs. I pray that you will not just enjoy this song, but as you listen to it, you will reflect on God's incredible love, His redeeming grace, and you too would be reminded that we were all born to be loved.
I was born